Hey, it's Anthony Whitaker here, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast. This is the final episode in our three-part series on the 5 pillars of salon success. Now, if you remember, in episode 1, we talked about the number one mistake keeping salon owners stuck, trying to solve business problems by being better technicians instead of developing better business skills. In episode 2, we went deep into the money pillar, why your salon might be busy but not necessarily profitable, and exactly how to fix it. Now today I'm going to do something different again. I'm going to tell you a story. It's the true story of a salon owner who was exactly where many salon owners might be right now, no matter where in the world you're listening to this. And that is overwhelmed, working 60 plus hour weeks, confused about money, stuck as the busiest person in the business. And then, at least for her, everything changed. You see, this is a story about a young woman that I had the pleasure of coaching intensely for 12 months. And although I didn't set out to do it, it served as a case study for my business school intensive program that we're in the middle of launching as I record this. But before I tell you her story, I do want to take you back in time to the 90s. I know that's a long way back, but it's when I had 3 salons, because there was a particular day that my life changed. So let me tell you about that first. You see, there's a book called The E-Myth. It was published at the end of the 80s, I think, and I'm sure that many of you would have read it, and if you haven't, then you probably should. Now, the tagline of the book is why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. Anyway, I lived in Sydney at the time, and I'd seen an advertisement that essentially said that the author of The E-Myth, Michael Gerber, was coming to town to present a half-day program. Now, I hadn't read the book, I didn't really know a lot about it, but I decided that I needed to go along to this. So I bought a ticket and I went along and I sat in the auditorium along with 400 or 500 other people, mostly businessmen in suits. Now, this certainly wasn't a hairdressing event. In fact, it was actually the first business conference that I had ever attended. But I don't mind saying that I absolutely loved it. And on reflection, this was the morning that my life changed. Now, not because I met my wife on that morning, but it changed because I finally understood what it was that I was trying to do with my business. And when the morning coffee break came, I was very excited, thinking about what it was that I needed to do with my 3 salons at the time. And I was standing in the foyer drinking my coffee, and a young lady came up to me and she asked, "Are you Anthony Whitaker, the hairdresser?" And of course I said, "Yes, why?" And she said, "Well, I have a salon too." Now, just to be clear, I'm sure that we would have been the only 2 hairdressers in that entire room. And I asked her, "Are you enjoying it?" Meaning the conference. And she sort of screwed up her nose and she said, "Well, it's not really got anything to do with hairdressing, has it?" And then she leaned in a little bit and said, "I think I'll leave after the coffee break." Now, that was the moment, 11 a.m. in a hotel foyer in Sydney, where my salon business changed for the better, but it was also the moment that has taken me to where I am today. Because, you see, she couldn't see that she didn't have a hairdressing salon. She had a business that happened to do hair. And the wisdom that was being shared by the presenter on stage was absolutely life-changing for, I'm sure, not just me, but for any business owner who understood what their real business was. And that takes me full circle back to the story that I want to share with you today, because it's the story of a young woman who owned a salon and nothing was working the way that it was meant to. She was on the edge, and all she could keep telling me about was that she was a good hairdresser and that she couldn't understand why her business didn't just work. So I'm going to call her Sarah, and this is her story. So let's dive in. Now, as I said, she kept telling me how good a hairdresser she was, and she was a very talented stylist. She was known as a good hairdresser. She always had been, and she worked in several high-end salons around town, and she'd built a very loyal following over the years. And then about 5 years ago, it wasn't long after COVID, she did what many talented stylists do. She decided to go and open up her own salon. She was excited. She had a vision. She wanted freedom. She wanted opportunity to employ who she wants and use the products that she wants. And she wanted the satisfaction of building a business of her own. And she'd found this great location. It's a really beautiful space, and she put everything into it. All of her savings, all of her energy, and her love and passion for hairdressing. Now, for the first year, she was running on pure adrenaline. But then reality started to set in. You see, when I first met Sarah, here's what her life looked like. She was working a 6-day week and working 10-hour days almost every day. She was behind the chair doing clients, Tuesday through to Saturday. She was rammed. She was fully booked. And on Mondays, her supposed day off, she was doing admin. She was ordering stock. She was dealing with payroll, and she was trying to keep up with the social media. She did have a small team, though. She had 2 stylists and a junior or an assistant. But here's the thing. Sarah was doing about 60% of the salon's total revenue herself. Her team was, well, let's just say they weren't performing at the level that she needed them to, but I'm not going to necessarily blame them. Neither was Sarah. There were low rebooking rates, there was minimal retail sales, and there was very definitely an inconsistent client experience. So effectively, Sarah was sort of carrying the entire business on her back financially. She couldn't take a holiday because the salon would fall apart without her. She couldn't take a sick day. She couldn't even take a full day off. Everything, and I mean everything, depended on her being there. And here's the part that really got to her. She was making less money than she did as an employee. A lot less money. After rent, after payroll, after purchasing salon supplies, after all the expenses, she was taking home less than she earned working for someone else. She'd traded job security and a steady paycheck and all the employee benefits for more work, more stress, and less money. And she was absolutely exhausted, physically exhausted from the hours, mentally exhausted from the constant decision making, emotionally exhausted from feeling like she was failing all the time. She'd lie awake at night thinking, did I make a huge mistake? Should I just close the salon if I can and go back to working for someone else? But she'd invested everything. She'd even borrowed money from her parents to keep the salon going. She couldn't just walk away. So she kept pushing. She kept working harder. She kept hoping things would get better. But they didn't. Because she was trying to solve business problems by being a better and busier stylist. That's what I mean when I say you don't own a salon. You own a business that happens to do hair. She was doing more clients. She was working longer hours. She was doing more colour. But the business's problems weren't getting solved. I know that sounds familiar to many salon owners that will be listening to this. And then came the breaking point. She told me that one day she was running late because she'd been up until midnight the night before trying to figure out why her bank balance was what it was despite having a fully booked week. She rushed into the salon and one of her stylists called in sick at the last minute. Sarah had to rebook that stylist clients onto her own already packed schedule. She had to work through lunch, and by 3 p.m. she was behind. She had clients waiting, and she was trying to mix colour while answering the phone and texting a supplier about a late delivery. And she just broke. Not visibly, or at least she told me that she held it together for the clients, but inside she said that was the moment where something shifted. And she thought to herself, I can't keep doing this. This is not sustainable. Something has got to change. And so that night, she tells me that she sat down at her kitchen table with a glass of wine and she did something that she'd always been avoiding. She looked at her numbers. She rarely looked at them. And what she saw absolutely terrified her. Her salon had done $45,000 in revenue the previous month. But after all the expenses, she netted less than $2,000 for an entire month of exhausting work. That's when she realized that she didn't have a work ethic problem, and she didn't have a talent problem. She had a business education problem. She didn't know how to run a profitable business, And no amount of working harder was going to fix that for her, and it didn't fix it for me either. So she made a decision. She was going to learn the business side of her salon. She found one of my free training series and she identified exactly where her problems were. And then she contacted me about my management course at the time and wanted some one-on-one coaching. Now, she almost didn't do that. She thought, I don't have time for all this. I can't afford the investment right now. Anyway, she called me, we jumped on a Zoom call and we talked about her goals, her challenges and her fears, and she made the commitment. Now, it wasn't a 12-month commitment at the time. She just made a commitment to do the management course and some coaching calls. But over the 12 months, she ended up doing all 4 of my courses at the time with coaching, and she started a year ago in January 2025. Now, let me tell you what has happened over the last year. So, in the first quarter of 2025, we focused on her as a manager and as a leader. You see, Sarah's biggest problem was that everything lived in her head. She had no documented systems. There were no processes. There was just Sarah making every decision, handling every problem, being the glue that was sort of holding everything together. So in quarter 1, we devoted a lot of time to making sure that she had the right systems and processes in place. First of all, we created a client journey system. From the moment a client books to the moment they rebook their next appointment, every step documented. Who greets them, what gets said during the consultation, how services are going to be recommended, how the checkout process works, how rebooking happens. Sarah and I went through all of it and we documented it. Then we did the same for inventory management, for opening and closing procedures, for social media posting. We ended up doing it pretty much for everything. Now, at first, I don't mind saying to you, Sarah resisted a lot of this stuff. She said, Anthony, this feels like a lot of work and I don't have time to document everything. But as I said to her at the time, Sarah, you're spending at least 2 hours a week training your team on the same things over and over again because nothing's written down. Document it once and you'll save hundreds of hours. So she did it. In fact, she actually recorded a lot of it on her phone and made these great little mini videos that were training videos for her team. Anyway, within 6 weeks, something remarkable started happening. Her team started handling things without asking her because they had a manual, they had videos, they had procedures, they knew what to do. Sarah was still working full-time behind the chair, but the mental load lifted. She wasn't making every single decision anymore. By the end of quarter 1, Sarah had reduced her admin time from 10 hours a week to about 3 hours a week because the systems handled it. That's the power of getting the management pillar and all the stuff involved in the management side of your business under control. In quarter 2, we then focused on money. Now, this was really hard for Sarah, but hey, it's really hard for many salon owners. Let's face it, as an industry, it's often our Achilles heel. And she'd been avoiding her numbers for so long because they scared her. But we sat down virtually on a coaching call and I walked her through her profit and loss statement, line by line. I showed her how to read it. I explained what each category meant and where money was being wasted. And then we calculated her cost per service. I have a thing called a service price per minute calculator that I work through. Now, Sarah happened to be in the UK, so I'm going to talk about pounds here. But it turns out that Sarah was underpricing many of her services, in some instances by about £12 per service. She was charging £65 for a cut and blow dry when her actual cost to deliver that service was at least £38. And her desired profit margin meant that she should have been charging something more like £78. So effectively, she was losing £12 every single time that she delivered that service. Now, we did the math, and if she did that service, or she and her team, 20 times per week, 48 weeks per year, allowing for some holiday time, that's 11,520 per year in lost revenue just from underpricing that one service. Multiply that across all her services, because she was losing some of the other services as well, and she was losing over £30,000 annually. Now, I don't mind saying that Sarah was shocked. I was as well, but I've seen that before, and I'm sure I'll see it again. But here's the beautiful thing. This was totally fixable. We built a pricing structure based on what her actual cost plus desired profit margin plus market positioning, because you've got to take that into account. And we raised the prices on services that were losing money. Not all of them, but definitely the ones that were losing money. Now, Sarah was absolutely terrified of doing this. I had to have that talk with her about, listen, you might lose some clients, but it's not the end of the world. Most clients will just suck it up and it won't be a problem. She thought that she'd probably lose half of her clients, but we implemented it strategically. We communicated it well. We positioned it as a reflection of the quality and the expertise the salon offered. And do you know what happened? Well, she thinks she lost 3 clients in total. 3 out of over 200 active clients. 3 left because of the price increase. And her annual revenue increased by well over £40,000. Plus, we worked on reducing her expenses. We identified the waste in terms of over-ordering products and inefficient scheduling and unnecessary subscriptions that she had. And within 90 days, Sarah had reduced her expenses by 15% without cutting quality or reducing anyone's wages. By the end of quarter 2, Sarah had her first genuinely profitable month in over 3 years. She actually took home a decent paycheck and was able to repay her parents some money that they'd been loaning her. And she finally could say that she understood her numbers. That's the power of getting educated, and that's what I covered with her and anyone else who does the money course. So that takes us into quarter 3. Now, quarter 3, we focused on 2 things: marketing and developing her team through the Super Stylist program, which was the first course we put out there. So first of all, let's talk about marketing. Sarah's biggest issue was client retention. But do you know what? That's the industry's biggest issue as well. See, she was getting new clients, mostly through Instagram and word of mouth, but typical of industry averages, about 60% of her new clients never came back for a second visit. So again, effectively, she was pouring water into a bucket that had a massive hole in the bottom of it. So what did we do? Well, we started to build a retention system, a new client welcome process, a follow-up sequence, a rebooking strategy, a loyalty program. We trained her team on consultations, those critical first 10 seconds with every client that comes in. We introduced a salon management software system so that she could track client history and record the client preferences and follow-ups. And Sarah's retention rate for first-time visit went from 40% to 68% within 3 months. That's huge, because retained clients are exponentially more valuable than getting new clients. Then we decided to work with her team and to put them through the Super Stylist course. Now, her 2 stylists went through the entire Super Stylist training. They learned about productivity and consultations and retail and rebooking and the client experience, the customer journey, all that sort of stuff. These are the business skills that turn average stylists into high performers. Anyway, within 8 weeks, things started to shift. One stylist increased her average ticket from £48 to £67. The other stylist's rebooking rate went from 35% to 72%. Retail sales went from basically non-existent to some weeks 18% of salon revenue. Sarah wasn't carrying the business financially anymore. Her team was contributing properly. By the end of quarter 3, the salon's total revenue had increased by 42% compared to the previous year. And Sarah's personal workload behind the chair had decreased because her team was now more productive. That's the power of marketing and the Super Stylist part of it, working together. Anyway, the end of last year, quarter 4, I started road testing the team building, the HR program that we're working on releasing at the end of 2026. Anyway, she'd had 5 different stylists over a previous period of 3 years. There was this constant hiring, training, losing people, starting over again. So what we did was build a training and retention system, a proper job description, an interview process, an onboarding checklist, a 90-day training program. We created a compensation structure that rewarded performance. And most importantly, we defined her salon culture. You see, what did Sarah's salon stand for? What were the values? What kind of environment was she building? She'd never thought about that before. She'd never really articulated it. So we did that. And she started hiring based on culture fit, not just technical and creative skill. She started developing her team intentionally. Monthly one-on-ones, quarterly reviews, career development plans. And something really cool started to happen. Her stylists were happy. They were growing. They were making better money. They wanted to stay. That's the power of getting the team component, the HR component under control. So anyway, let me tell you where Sarah is today. I've recently just got off the phone from her and I've said to her that I was going to make this podcast, and she said as long as I changed her name, I could. So it's not Sarah, but 12 months after starting, she's still working full-time behind the chair because she absolutely loves it. But here's what's different. She works 5 days a week now instead of 6. She takes Sundays and Mondays off. She took a 2-week holiday to Spain last summer, and the salon ran perfectly without her. Her systems worked, her team knew what to do, everything was documented. Her salon revenue increased by 60% compared to the year before business school. Well, it wasn't called business school intensive then, but before she started the coaching program and working through all the courses. Now, it didn't increase by 60% because she worked more. It increased by 60% because she worked smarter, better pricing, better retention, better team performance, better systems. Her personal income has more than doubled. She's paid back her parents all the money that they loaned her, and she's actually making herself good money now. She's not lying awake in bed at night worried about payroll anymore or paying the rent. She now understands her numbers, and she makes decisions based on data. And her team is stable and more productive and happy. And she has 2 stylists who've been with her for over a year and not showing any signs of leaving. And here's what she told me after our final coaching call. Anthony, I finally feel like a business owner instead of just a busy stylist. I've got a business that works and I love it. And that's what a real salon transformation story looks like. Now, I want you to hear something really important. Sarah, on her own admission, is not special. She's not a genius. She's not lucky. She doesn't have some secret advantage. She's a talented stylist. Well, she's a very talented stylist who opened a salon and struggled, just like most salon owners do. The only difference is she made a decision. She decided to stop piecing together random bits and pieces of advice from YouTube and where she used to work before. She decided to stop trying to figure it out alone. She decided to invest time and money in a systematic business education program with coaching and accountability. And that decision changed everything. Now, that business transformation program is available to you too. As I said at the beginning, this was the sort of precursor to me launching this year my business school intensive. Now, if you haven't watched the free 3-part video training yet, you better go and do that today because they will be taken down this week. It's called the 5 Things Holding Your Salon Back from Growing and How to Fix Them. There will be a link in the show notes, but it won't be active for long, so you're going to need to be quick. And if you watch those videos, it's going to give you the complete framework, the same framework basically that Sarah has used. And if you're ready for the full transformation for your business, if you really want to dig in and work hard for 12 months on all 5 pillars with one-to-one coaching and the accountability that goes with it, then Business School Intensive is open right now for you. Now, here's the thing though. We have limited it purposefully to only 10 salon owners. And as of today, we've already got 6 of those 10 spots filled. Applications will close on January the 28th, or when we hit 10, whichever comes first. So Sarah's story could be your story. And 12 months from now, you could be looking back at this moment as the decision that changed everything for you. Or you could be exactly where you are right now, still overwhelmed, still stuck, still struggling, and wondering how it's going to turn around. That choice is all down to you. So all the details are at growmysalonbusiness.com. And this has been a 3-part series on the 5 pillars of salon success. If you've been following along, you now understand the number one mistake that's keeping you stuck. You'll understand why you're busy but not necessarily profitable, and what transformation actually looks like when you master and put the work into all 5 pillars. Now, the framework is really clear. The path to it is proven. And the only question is, are you ready to take it? I hope that Sarah's story has inspired you. It certainly inspired me, and I hope it showed you what's possible. And I hope it gave you the courage to make a change. So go watch the free training for Business School Intensive, and if you're ready, then I'd love to join you and build something incredible together in 2026. So thanks for listening, and I will see you next week.